So as we begin this morning, I want to take a quick informal survey. How many of you have ever bought things online that had to be shipped to you? All right, good. Now, you who have done this, and this is most of us, does anybody else find yourself checking the tracking page on your package incessantly? Anybody else? Okay, the first service left me hanging, so I'm glad to see that my people are here. Yeah, I find myself doing that too. So whatever it is that's on its way, part of it is my own impatience, and then part of it is the fascination of how we're connected together in this sort of network of trucks and delivery vehicles to all the other places around the world. But there's something about that incessant, obsessive, refreshing, and checking that somehow is part of waiting for me. And I was thinking about it this week. It's sort of the modern day equivalent of that scene from the movie A Christmas Story. You remember that movie? With Ralphie, right? So Ralphie has been listening to Little Orphan Annie on the radio, and they've had this special offer. If you only will drink 20 gallons of Ovaltine, then you can send in the receipts and get the secret decoder ring, right? The official Little Orphan Annie secret decoder ring. And Ralphie has made it, and he's sent off for it. And at the end of every broadcast is a secret message. And so, coming home from school every day, we see it, several times. He comes home, first thing he does, checks the mailbox. Nothing there. There's mail in there. He leaves it there, closes it back up, and goes inside dejected. Next day, comes back, checks the mailbox. Nothing there. Next day, checks the mailbox. It's not there. This day, checks the mailbox. There's a package, and it's addressed to him. So he grabs it, leaving the rest of the mail in the mailbox, by the way, runs inside, rips it open, and it's his secret decoder ring, and he listens very carefully to the broadcast and writes down the secret message, and then quickly he's scrambling, and meanwhile you hear this commentary, his thought process of what this is going to mean for him, what secrets are going to be revealed, how he's going to be able to help, and how desperate little orphan Annie must be for his help, because here he has it, and he gets to the end of it, and he reads it, and it says, drink more Ovaltine. It's a great scene because all of us grown-ups watching it know exactly how he feels, right? There's something in us that as we order things or as we wait for things, we very often find ourselves expecting it's going to change us. So for myself, whatever I have ordered, a CD coat, whatever it is, as I'm waiting for it, even despite my best cognitive efforts as a relatively functioning grown-up in the world, I still find myself deep down inside waiting for it and thinking, that's going to change things. I know better, but I still can't help but thinking, this is going to fulfill something. So I hit tracking, and I hit refresh over and over again. And what got me thinking about that this week is something the devil said. So we eavesdropped on a conversation between Jesus and the devil, and they're out in the desert. It's been 40 days they've been out there together, and there's been nothing to eat or drink. And it says that the devil's been with Jesus the whole time, picking at him. Right? That seems to be how the devil works. Just picking at us, wearing us down, constantly picking at us. And now at the end of these 40 days, in one of these great understatements of the Bible, it says, and Jesus was hungry, or famished, it says, and Jesus was famished. Now, at the end of it, the devil has brought his major ammunition. He's been picking at Jesus and wearing him down, and now he brings his big three. And it was the second of the tests, the temptations, that really caught my ear. In the second one, the devil's penultimate one, he's building up here. He takes Jesus, whisks him someplace high, shows him all the kingdoms of the settled world, and says, you see all of this glory? All that can be yours. All you have to do is just bow down a little bit, and I'll hand it to you. It's mine, and I'll just give it over to you. And I was thinking about this, and at first I thought, well, how ridiculous. I mean, the devil doesn't actually have that to promise. We shouldn't be surprised. We call the devil the father of lies for a reason. He always lies. And we know better than that. We know the end of the story and that God is the king of the whole world, King of kings and Lord of all nations, all that stuff. We know the truth. It's not the devil's. And so the devil's promising something that's not his to give. And at first I thought, well, what a ridiculous temptation that is. But then I got to thinking about some of the other temptations that we encounter, or even other temptations the devil presents here. The third one, the big one, that whole jump off the pinnacle of the temple thing. The devil's trying to promise God's behavior. I'm pretty sure that's not his to promise. But it's true for us too, the things that we encounter, right? Oreo cookies. Oreo cookies come to us with a promise that if you just eat this little round thing, or 19 of them, you will receive satisfaction and you will be comfortable. And all they really have to deliver is a sugar rush and carbohydrate coma. They're promising something that isn't theirs to give. Or take every a car commercial you've ever seen. Every one of them is based around a lifestyle. If you just drive this car, then you will have a life that looks like this. But the truth is, a car doesn't give life. They're promising something that's not theirs to give. And it goes beyond marketing too, right? It's more than just the commercial messages that are being given to us. Think about other temptations that we encounter. An affair, a one-night stand. Those promise us a shortcut to intimacy, but we know that intimacy only comes through commitment and a long time of working at it. It promises something that's not theirs to give. And I started to think that this is one of those ground pieces about temptation. Temptation, as we encounter it, promises us something that isn't theirs to give. And so as I started to think about those temptations in my life and started thinking about those promises that are being given without the ability to fulfill, I started to think about promises that have been fulfilled. Because every marketing strategy, every temptation, every politician, they come to us with a promise of life. If you just do this, you'll have what you want. And the truth is, in my life, there's only been one person who has ever promised me life and has had it to fulfill, to give. There's only one person who's ever promised life abundant and actually has it to give. There's only one person who has ever promised to transform us from the inside out. There's only one person who has ever promised life that stretches from now all the way past reasonable expectation to forever that doesn't belong to us. There's only one person who's ever promised life and has it to give. And that one person is Jesus. I came that they may have life abundant, he says. Only Jesus can deliver a life of purpose and meaning, a life of grace and peace, a life that is worth living all the way to forever. Only Jesus. And that's a promise that he gives to us freely. As a gift. as something you can't work for, but you don't have to either. It's just yours. Jesus makes a promise that he can keep. And it turns out, as together we learn and grow in that promise, and as together we experience and dig deeper into the promise that Jesus gives us, into the promise of God, it turns out that all the other stuff flows out of it almost automatically. All the other things that we maybe ought to do, or the things that we want to do, flow out of that promise. So resist temptation? Yes, because Jesus has promised. And just like Jesus, when we anchor ourselves in who we really are, children of God, and the words of God that God has given us so that we can learn and be shaped, it turns out we can see through those. And we can hold fast to a real promise. Love your neighbor no matter who they are. Well, only because Jesus promised. And Jesus has promised that he loves you and he loves them. And because he loves you, we want to love the people that he loves. It comes out of that promise. Serve the poor, the lost and forgotten out in the world. Yes, because that's God's heart and God's mission in the world. And because God loves us, we want to be part of it too. Do something crazy like Deuteronomy recommends and give ourselves and our stuff away first, only because God has promised that it is enough and that he will provide. And God never breaks a promise. Out of the promise of God, the promise that Jesus has given us, everything else falls and flows from that. It's a crazy thing. Just by knowing and anchoring ourselves in the promise of God, it changes everything else from the inside out. After all, that is what Jesus promised, right? Life. Life that starts now. And so, as we wrap up our time together for our time of reflection, we're going to try something a little different. I'm going to push you outside your comfort zones and invite you to turn to your neighbor. And instead of sitting in silence, I'll invite you to reach out and trace the mark of the cross, that mark of baptism, on each other's foreheads. Just on Wednesday, we did that, right? On Wednesday, we did that with ashes as a reminder of who we're not. Today, I'm going to ask you to do it with your finger or your thumb as a reminder of who we really are. All right? So reach out, mark the sign of the cross, and say, you are a child of God. All right?